Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks to all of you for joining us here at Woodland Pattern and out there in your places that you are in. Really exciting to host this reading in celebration of some recent publications by Friedman, Jennifer Nelson, and Gabriel Cruz. I'm Mike Wendt. I'm the program director here at Woodland Pattern. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement and say that we acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We further acknowledge the grave evil colonialism introduced to these lands through genocide as well as slavery, but also via racist and xenophobic beliefs, laws, and practices that continue to inflict harm upon Black, Brown, and Indigenous lives. We honor those who have lived and do live now at these intersections of identity and experience and are committed to the active dismantling of white supremacy. Thanks once again for joining us. Amazing. Thank you, Gabe and Jennifer and Lewis. Wonderful. We have copies of books by all three for sale at the front. Most recent books being I Want Something Other Than Time by Friedman, Jennifer Nelson's Harm Eden, and Gabe Cruz's Acid Virga. So please see Peter after the reading if you're here in the room. And if you're out there, you can find those books at woodlandpatternbookcenter.com or come see us at another time when you're not at home, comfortable watching in your bed. I hope you'll consider joining us for some upcoming events. We are hosting, actually right now available online to view is the latest program from A Cinema, the curatorial duo of Janelle Vanderkellen and Takahiro Suzuki. They've shared a program of moving image works that will be available throughout the month. And then there's also a conversation happening this Friday, November 5th on Zoom at 7 p.m. Central Time. And those programs are always just like surprising and magical and wonderful. So I recommend at least watching the films, but also joining us on Zoom on Friday. And next week, Saturday, November 3rd, we're thrilled to host a reading featuring, so not this coming Saturday, but 1 week from, featuring Roberto Harrison, Paulo Javier, and Asia Kushwa Duncan. Paulo and Roberto will be here with us at Woodland Pattern, and then Asia will be joining remotely. That will begin at 7 p.m. Central Time, and will be streamed via Crowdcast, like this reading. Okay, finally, the poets reading this evening may choose to be unmasked, and that's great. I thank all of you in the audience for keeping your masks on throughout. Thanks, and for all that you're doing to help us keep, one another safe in this space. It's great to be back in this space, and it's great to be hosting visiting writers. This is a milestone. It's the first visiting writers reading since February 2020. So that's really amazing, actually. So we did it. Okay, Gabe Cruz is going to kick things off. Gabriel Cruz is a poet, educator, and arts administrator originally from New Mexico. He is a co-founder of Wendy's Subway and the author of Acid Virga from Archway Editions, and editor and contributor to Return to the Field from Wendy's Subway. His work has been published with Within A Perfect Vacuum, the Pen American Poetry Series, OmniVerse, the Brooklyn Rail, the Atlas Review, Frontier Poetry, among others. Cruz's Acid Virga is cascading and dexterous, electric and alive in, quote, a hyperspace of memory and nerve. A richly descriptive and evocative verse memoir, it is, as Alice Notley describes, quote, a blend of narrative and lyric, the way the mind is. Cruz's poems animate past lives while inhabiting, quote, this body, this cinema of meanwhile. I'd agree with Tom Slay that Acid Virga is, quote, a book unparalleled in its exploration of how visionary experience and social upheaval collide in ways that are both transformative and annihilating, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Gabe Cruz. Thanks.
What an honor to be the first reader back. I tried to come here earlier and I was refused. I was here in Wisconsin a couple months ago and they were like, we're not doing it. And I was like, all right, I'll come back. So I'm really happy to be here. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Laureen Knightiker was a huge influence on this book. Came out last year about this time. Right in the middle of the pandemic, and I feel like being in Wisconsin, I should, read some of the work that was inspired by her. Being from a rural place, coming to New York, and thinking a lot about that rurality is what a lot of this book is about. So I'm going to start with a poem called Say, which is kind of an invocation. And if you know Laureen's work, you'll notice there's a line from her in here. So, say poetry's air, money's ore, or poetry's a kind of money. Say dirt and not copper makes a color darker and makes the shape so heavy and makes no melody harder. Or say there's money but it rusted. Say poetry's not a luxury, and I know I'm space, my body's air. Or this is a shape of blood beating and cells dividing, but outside of the shape is space. Say, thus the air's a luminous shadow which accompanies the body, or poetry's the body's body. And then I'm going to skip, that's the first poem in the book, and I'm going to skip to the last poem in the book, which is a long poem called Regression. And Laureen had a poem called Progression that inspired me to write this, kind of looking back through time rather than forward through time. So there's a epigraph from her, "You murmur your magic, what help is the past?" So you'll notice that as I move through this poem, it goes from fall to summer to spring to fall to winter to spring instead of the other way around. Fall, for Carolyn. Relinquishment. At least that's what they say when the haggling's done, the act of opening the hand. But if it ever truly ends, in between are phrases the experts will never recognize, interleaved with disbelief and fury, delirium, glossolalia, hysterical, nostalgia, etc. Or the stage in which one eats too much Xanax, gummy bears and caviar from the bodega around the corner, takes a nap face down, listening to the neighbor's old soul records filtered through the floorboards. As for me, I keep attempting rational sentiments despite myself. Cold comfort and architecture of tics and rhetoric, like it's no good hoping for accuracy from the flowcharts that mark grief's progression. The swamp, after all, is not the map, and yet one longs for an argument nonetheless, the in which the plot is laid bare. As in Paradise Lost or other arcane texts. What comes next? Savoring almost nothing before grief resurges, what remains is the tension of the chiastic structure and its spillage, as if it were an accident when describing the origins of good and evil, that a hero is made of the fallen one, how elegiac rolls off the tongue with an unacknowledged hush at the beauty of others' sorrow, the devil in the details, or the accumulation of velleities so many I know and love would ascribe to God's catastrophic hand. Over coffee in LA, having dreamed away the night beside each other, as chaste as brother and sister, you said you felt the opposite when I tried to recall the taxonomy of mediocre poets possessed by evil spirits. How the devil guides the worst poets' pens, angels the best, etc. But I never had the chance to ask you what you thought the difference was. Like me, you were appalled by angels you didn't believe in, yet still knew what it meant to be brushed by the weight of their hymn and baffled. A campy kind of opera like, every angel is terrifying, well-built, and adorned in flame and lame. Still cross-eyed with desire, still longing to see what the future holds. How can I employ reason to make myself feel what I know to be true when you're the one who animates my disbelief, lingering like the day that's over but clings to your nerves a while, still waiting sentimentally in a year that ended sentimentally in the middle of a season, is how you put it. Like lying still on a summer's evening with the impress of the pool's blue sway rippling through your equilibrium, an intaglio of motion. It washes over you, and you wake with a start, lift your face from the floorboards to return to the freezer to freshen your drink. And you read, as if by instinctual misprision, you surround me to mean a kind of dysphoria, as in, who is this body I'm embedded in? It leaves you breathless. Who are these people? That old refrain, this can't be life. How it must feel to find your own words and quotes, the body's body. As if you're anything, you're the flattening of so many into one being, possessed, not relinquished, drowning in or swaddled by them, a channel through which grief returns refreshed, the way a river traces the bed it carves, on the surface unchanged yet deepened. You surround me. Summer. Is this what true love feels like? This bitter earth, and nonetheless yearning out of season for Saturnalian rites of oversaturation, a bloodbath, and nonetheless the sky and dusky hydrangeas sopping blues and purples terminally in bloom. When the automatic knell erupts the disco's vesper in this new dark age, I hear it like an open invitation to declare my love for sentimentality. After all, don't they say reason is, in a certain light, the mere sentiment of those who can afford to believe in a rational world? But what, I want to know, cuts without hesitation to the quick. If you say her name, say it again. In opal light, for instance, in liquid crystal display light, the flimmer of vaporizer light, or the phone screens relucent across the cab's back seat, idling in the hospital's shadow, and the strobe of red and blue light-emitting diodes, and the nightclub's magenta pulse, and the idiorhythmic trace of the heart rate monitor belying delirium, drift. Spring. Question. What's the saddest music in the world? Answer. It's either me singing Sign of the Times cover to cover, or all the time someone like you has wondered, but how much survives? How much of any one of us survives, seemingly granting us all permission to hate ourselves less? 3:22 of a Thursday, arriving at the pearly gates via perverse kinesis, Prince has died. And I remember when the playlist labeled Paradise was empty, as if only briefly, everything ceased being everything, yet the record's dark arrondissement went on spinning anyway, even after the needle had lifted. Imagine murmuring, "Goodbye, cruel world," then leaving behind a vault of silently blistering solos. Goodbye, and a selfie in a 16th century vanity or a saint's flayed skin. Alone, reading dirty poem, it's clear the body has enough to reckon with within itself, sugars foaming in the pulp, the invisible apothecary brewing its own alcohols, etc. But the doctor's explanation is simple, if enigmatic. The silver palomino, pent up and anxious, dances as if on stilettos, nipping at her flanks till she bleeds. As if hacking her own nervous system, she floods her enormous body with wine. Winter. It seems slow at this distance and calmly fatal, a slight nova, insignificant diamonds and rings of irrelevant silk. On the phone's screen, twin blue suns turning a deeper blue, torqued and twisting deeper as they slow, each collapsing into the vortex of the other. These far distant black stars under this filter are not unlike the fluorescent cells in the cervix and ovaries, highlighted by dyes marking our mother's cancer's growth. Out of reach, light swallowing light, and briefly an eclipse green autophagy. Or like the ultrasound grayscale twins growing where their sister grew before them in my sister's womb. The tissues like heat waves flowing off of bright white masses. But what does it mean if all the colors are false, the space-age purr of the heavenly bodies, mere artifice? As the end advances, will the seasons accelerate in their rhythms, spring and then spring again? You can't simply reapply the emulsion crumpling from the tapes, then listen again. And I'm bringing us back to fall, and then I'm going to read something else. Fall. The calendars are wrong, the weather's wrong too. 72 degrees early in the evening in early November, warm enough out to read neon clouds in a cheap silk shirt, starry night-like and overlaid with pinwheels. Go out, sip a rock on the stoop, a splash of cold water, an instant pearl. I remember leaving to Bourdonnage on a night like this, puking vertiginously at 56 and Park, thinking of Lisa Robertson saying something like, psychology oozes from every object. Something rattles in my skull, a lily of the valley in my jaw, little more than florilegia and a death drive. Still, I want to know who of you will invent a new metric, that which can be measured in erratic tonnage, and moorings exposed, etc., murmuring goodbye, green world, as another green world enters and exits our orbit. At 180 grams, it decays as it spins, and we only ever listen at the height of summer, which seems just to have passed, but is no doubt quickly approaching. So I have this book that I worked on with Wendy Subway, which I just finished moving, like last week. I just turned 37 last week. I packed all my stuff up. I have 2 weeks before I fly to Northern Ireland, so this is my last couple of weeks in the US, which feels great. And one of the last things I'm doing here is launching this book, which I helped edit, and it's basically a kind of the book version of a variety of programs that I helped Martha Tuttle, the artist Martha Tuttle, work on at Storm King. And so Wendy Subway, which I helped found 8 years ago now, which is really crazy, helped put it out. Philip, my friend who's here from Worm Farm, is in it. So you all should check it out. It should be available on our website, wendysubway.com. And I'm actually going to read a kind of excerpt that I composed for the final event, which was before the book was finished, or after the book was finished, for Jerome Ellis, the poet and musician. If you don't know Jerome's work, you should really check it out. Actually, Wendy's is putting out a book and an album by Jerome. It just came in to the shop 2 days ago, so really wonderful work. So, and if you all watch things on the internet, Poetry Project is going to be hosting the launch on the 12th, so I think you should be able to see it there. I think of music when I think of you, of the saxophonist who, like a mortal wrestling a brass angel, arrived amid the birdsong in the park each morning to play in the spring. His mellow gold arpeggios coming through the open window, so different somehow from the man we saw last summer playing on the waterfront. Veins, tendons in relief beneath his skin as he throttled through his song, drawing in and filling the air, tearing the night into intricate shreds, putting it back together again. No telling who was in whose thrall, each man's song like the advent of a new species of intimacy, like when in black music Baraka compares Coltrane's playing to witnessing a grown man learn to speak, disembodied, ambrosial, suffused suddenly with sulfur, and yet there in the mania of perichoresis, song, an error architecture of swerve or swirl and the theme of water, where ancestors or others' voices gather as electric, pure duration transpires over bridges finer than a hair's breadth. Catenary, 3,000 miles, and the centuries thinned to paper by its current. No, not an echo, but amplification. Is this what we've been seeking? When we sing or play their songs, not tautology, but like a wire, 2 points, hyperstatic, lapped in copper, imposed over one another entire, virtually as near, say, as Mannahatta is to Manhattan. When I let myself listen, it's like you say, what we call I is a swinging door through which self enters on the inhale and exits upon release. Your throat, your mouth, punctuation to me, a gate or threshold where, on one side, the I resides in silence, while the exhalation on the other occasions a kludge or plenum, a harmonic space the we inhabits, where words are or music's made. And it's this place I think of when I think of you, among some stones which are even now filling with light, as if coursing in place, as pools of time arise in tides of silence and, like a vapor, settle. Thinking of how, in the vacancy between the stones and you, something is supposed to happen. Your music, not only, but some third thing, like thinking of or being in, the noise of life, or life beyond suspension, or above and about an echolalia, we each might seek a niche within the birdsong or cicada rasp, a harbor in the highway's Doppler, the locust flickering click. For it's true, if a song's a mirror that knows the body by heart, then a field is a body whose noise means just that, an ecology not only, but bold arcades of blue and green where, like a censer, wild flowers release fragrant pillars and, as you say, sound is carried by wind or water or mason bee, is not carried by wind or water or mason bee or ruby-throated hummingbird, but by the silence that authorizes and protects all music. How do we feel I'm doing for time? I feel like I didn't do a good job of, okay. I'm going to read one more, but it's long. So, I kind of think of this book in terms of seasons. So, the first section is moving forward through the seasons, and the second section is moving back through the seasons. And so this poem, which I'm about to read, is the winter season. Mucinex. Meanwhile, in Almalpais, leaned out on Mucinex, mixing Dexy cocktails in the haloed pharmacy of the car, rides shotgun, our dad at the wheel, cruising dazed and feverish down the highway between Gallup and Grants. It's here where the sky is clear under a spray of stars, I lose them, where the magnetics go awry in the lava field and the compass tilting on the dash as if moved by an invisible hand, idles then whirs, where, as the signal goes under in a wash of static, M reaches up to scan the dial, country to metal, turns it up when Slipknot comes on, then watches her smoke flare and loom the dome light before it's whisked out the window when she flicks her cigarette onto the highway spinning away behind her. I think she likes it, he says, standing in the doorway while I'm in bed. Playing apothecary, grinding the pills, mixing up the syrups. And it's this scene he paints I play back in my head when I'm back in New York at my desk, staring out from the 13th floor at the skyline shimmering like ice unmelting, as if another world might break through the mirage heat. But when I turn back to the screen, it's clear it's no good reading Guy Debord when we know how fucked we are. So I watch instead the wind map in the shape of the state's seas send, with all its interlocking patterns and whirls rendered in real time, and feel, if only briefly, the breeze that rocks the Civic, where it picks up on the other side of the Valley of Horses. Dad jerk the wheel, steering back from the rumble strip, exhaling a crimped Coke can's worth of smoke, while in the back seat, Jay, M's boyfriend, and Z, his cousin, play guitar, inventing a kind of reservation slowcore, trading dope licks of Iron Maiden, Jimi Hendrix, Megadeth, B.B. King, and King Crimson. And it follows me home when after work, exhausted but unable to sleep, I lay awake listening to AM call-in shows, night preachers, conspiracy theorists, and ufologists, alongside bleeding-edge therapists and actual scientists, discussing station-to-station abduction, resurrection, and transgenerational hauntings, in which sublimated psychic material, or phantoms as they would have it, pass through the bloodline into the child's own subconscious. A residual trauma, the experts say, works like a ventriloquist, like a stranger within the subject's own mental topography. My dad, my age, on leave from the army, dissipated on acid, under the inevitable stars and the cliffs of Big Sur. M's mother of 13, pregnant with her first by the age M is now, and M due this November, working doubles at Sonic and Denny's for less than a living wage, on the dole, as they say, her medical expenses covered as if it were enough by her native blood. There's this faint dissolving light I listen for between the words to help me find sleep, no longer visible. Stretched out to radio waves now, it proceeds from and permeates the cosmos, a kind of non-quiet, oceanic nothing. The Big Bang attenuated to static, we pick up as TV snow, obscuring the voices and images I fall asleep imagining, wake up to the fugue of, play back on the way to work, a kind of familial Thelma and Louise in which we fuck up the boys who've raped her and suffer together the consequences of laws that will never protect her. Having accomplished nothing, when I need a break, I get up from my desk, take the elevator down, and walk the 7 minutes to the park, passing on the way the Bon Ami Boulangerie, where, half catatonic in the heat, a group of mothers eat gelato, drink Perrier, waiting for their daughters lounging down the street on the red carpet staircase of the Dominican Academy. And when I reach the park, I lay back on the rocks, replace the sun with blood, and listen for it behind my eyes. A tide that laps in the pulse at my neck, the artery delicate as a shell under my thumb, keeping time, enough to calm my nerves, read a poem or two before I put my heart back, tuck my shirt in, and feel above each hip stretch marks like seams of raw silk. This body, this cinema of the meanwhile, it's a hyperspace of memory and nerve I travel through to get to you. And when I catch a cold, I eat too much Mucinex, popping pills out of the foil as I walk to the subway at 60th and Lex, sweating and washing them down with XXX vitamin water to induce a fever that's lucid and dry like pulling sheer cloth across my face, as crystals and storms of crystals form in my lungs, and by the time I'm home, I'm coughing up clots, but I eat 4 more and then 4 more till my organs hurt. And it's stupid, I know, to think consanguinity could be achieved through narcosis, but it's miraculous, at least, how they clear the sinuses. How, as if in another country, my hands become outliers to me when I sit down again to write this poem. In the week I was back before the bank foreclosed on our family home, everything was in perfect disorder, with the symbolic precision of a nightmare. My huge family, the straw bale house my father built, mostly empty. I was sleeping in my parents' room, Dad in L's, M and C's, while the rest of the beds lay vacant. And on the second night, we stayed up late smoking out of M's favorite pipe, a metalhead's novelty shaped like a devil's claw making the A-OK gesture. Drawing from the wrist, swag packed like hot stigmata in the palm, this sonatiform dubstep trance piece Jay composed blaring on the laptop, ending in a montage of every laugh Mark Hamill ever laughed as the Joker in Batman the Animated Series. And in that moment, I found myself trying to imagine where I was when they were out there, leaned out on Mucinex, hanging out after a poetry reading, probably. 2 hours of cinema of the present, maybe. Or AWP, smoking out the window of the Harvard Advocate coat closet when D had just interrupted JT in their Mobius strip dialectic on privilege and the place of the other in the crisis of infinite worlds to survey the room for Adderall, uppers, anything, at which point T offers poppers and Dee sets to work rolling a joint on a filing cabinet while JT keeps repeating, "There is no we. There is no we, D. Don't you get it? That's the thing. There is no we." This, a brief forever, looped by virtue of the poppers, and M, there is no we, is rolling a joint even slower than Dee on the kitchen table, where that spring she, there is no we, sat filling jugs with knockoff Robitussin, Jolly Ranchers, Mucinex, and oxycodone, and later me, there is no we, and my dad talked about how the kids ate pills till their kidneys hurt, tripping in superposition. There is no we, shoplifting and mixing, driving back and forth to barter for swag till the huff-drunk flange. There is no we, of pure gold, icy vital nitrates, PBR and Zinfandel resolve into a pre-hungover hum, and the leaden echo goes quiet, the fluorescent lights go out, and it's morning, and M's frying donuts when I walk into the kitchen, a clear pool of lard in the skillet, a bag of bluebird flour on the corner beside her. And even though it's early and I haven't had my coffee, she asks me if I believe in demons, to which I say, I don't know, I guess so. But did I mean it? Thinking of Rattray again? Of poets, according to Jehez, the best are possessed by genies, the next best by friendly demons, the average by fallen angels, and the bad by the devil himself? Or was I merely moving the conversation along? I mean, think about it, she says. We all have one. Mom has one, Dad has one, I have one, you have one. But it only strikes me, waiting later that week for the plane to take me back to Brooklyn, that this is what others mean when they say soul. And from where I sat on the tarmac, the thunderheads appeared like guillotines tempered in honey, while the essence of the air was red, as it is each evening at that hour, slowed, the speed of light stopped gold, when nothing seems to happen all at once, and downpours sublime in the heat above our heads. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabe. That was fantastic. And the Mucinex is too real. Not like at this exact moment, but recently. All right. Louis Friedman is the author of Residual Synonyms for the Name of God, and I Want Something Other Than Time, as well as many chapbooks of poetry, including And Perhaps Yet from Oxide. In addition, he has authored several experiments on the form of the book, including Solitude, The Complete Games, and Hold the Blue Orb, Baby. He has taught creative writing at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Oklahoma State University, and served as visiting writer-in-residence at Carthage College. In Louis Friedman's I Want Something Other Than Time, the idiosyncratic and endlessly surprising poems speak, quote, in the cadence of digression, where we're at once, quote, in the body cave, the body boundaries, but also, quote, all and each alert and alive. Meditations on the mind's departure and return to itself, the self's departure and return to the larger world, interrogations of the very ideas of self and world. As Simone White notes, Friedman is, quote, one who knows the machine of his thought to be the poem. Please welcome Louis Friedman.
Hello. Hello. I want something other than time. The aim of this writing is to show that I does not disappear. Even when I disappear, I does not disappear. If I should achieve this, will I feel more or less isolated in the continuing progression of a paralysis I can only pathologize? It's not a mask, and the time over which it closes, that's not it. Not some chopped up tension between solitude and collectivity, not that. I disappears into my own voice below the confrontation with anonymity we might have imagined here. Better delirium than drift in my representations. Better anticipate a congealed posture, or else be effaced as the object of knowledge. I want something other than time. The need to feel satisfied disturbs the beliefs I'm entangled within. A crisis refusing to wait to awaken an activism within me. A crisis that puts my vocations to sleep. All objections subjected to utterance become negligible, on equal footing with the occasional mirage of received language which never ceases to be falling into the spaciousness of a space that starts voiding below me. Remember that time our inheritance was tested and we declined to speak? Our tears are clerks defiling a tragedy they know nothing of, you said so perfectly. And then with the other hand, I'm incapable of loosening the neck. And I can think, this is the air I am breathing, performing it as the only possible thought right now. I want something other than time. I carried myself far off from myself. I wasn't the master, not of my subject in either instance, and I couldn't contrast them. But putting the struggle of reason aside while still remaining in reason's system, the explanations multiply until prediction has yet to come about. And I'm told that it's the voice of myself embellishing the voice of myself to snatch effacement as it pronounces nothing. Will I admit to what's immobile in me again? That some new arrangement of pre-existing elements throws itself at this immobility to lose control of its phrases? Sure, because we hold revolution in an assumption of valor that even in its command against us gathers the self revived in recombination. I want something other than time. Mirror on the ground, eyes for sight. I turn both in the process of vanishing, and they turn too. Their rhythm goes, we live in a dome exchanged with others. What the fuck? Other domes or other selves? Sewers, Abatha. Sewers, said Abatha. A thinning thing is fevering the thought. A frameless sensitivity running parallel to time, shifting for balance back and forth between a trauma no longer in service to itself and a not-wise timelessness drifting in rotations around it. Is this a poem about how experience, bound as it is to projective surfaces, necessitates and negates a fiction of consciousness? And I acquaint this question to an unaskable mystery I feel when very close to my love's face I look into my love's face. Mirror for groundless sight, how we can't recover having met. I want something other than time. I want something from those years back. I whisper the text I'm reading, but still can't follow the transition between one moment and another. Even a same moment is to code an older and complex mystery whose demands and correspondences can only be improvised. The rule of moment is already excavated. Like, am I writing a book or in a book more? Or am I in the middle of this or in the place of its turn? Welcome to the sum of not everything it attempts to say. I can sense sound. I can sound sense. I want something other than time. if this is subservient to the relative immobility of syntax, guarantees that word like light falls here in one of three places and in relation to intelligible sun or glass eye hiding in suddenly star pit from where deep vibrancy affects us, then I'll flush at point of thought until it snaps and lifts impersonal in the contagions of our restrained presence. Gulp. I think of a father bringing back Toad in the hole like it's never been done and chatting on death from which no light escapes, as though it were N's syncopated fusion paradox that precipitates syntax's clairvoyance. I want something other than time. I wanted to have already read it, to have already written it, to have already heard the alarm and reached the end. Some hero blows back this sign before it becomes what becomes true. The heavens with no eye on earth. We want that supreme irresponsibility. I just want us to know how obstinately I stick to my suffering, as if some faint sign has emerged in the margins to cut short across the void again of self-knowledge, and it inscribes my name. Backed up against the subject again, and we are designating us the heroes. At least the instant will have gone back there. Shake, shake. Sleep, sleep. 50 years later, it's me again. I want something other than time. When Michel Serres points out that disorder only necessarily destroys order from order's perspective, I can feel something other than my ideas of time experienced traveling beyond the compass's axis interrupted. And in this disruption, I hear us telling us we shouldn't write about it. About how, for instance, if neither time nor eternity can let us feel unbound, then perhaps the whole thing's a question beyond direction, power, knowledge, pizza. And how, for instance, if I feel like our gestures and utterances, chopped in parcels from our bodies and our bodies' prosthetics, are as much a political party donation as a possibility of being, then, as the passerby pauses to repeat to us, there is no meaningful then between my no wings to be considered and my bewildered flight. I want something other than time. Do I feel scolded by the rain? Fuck no. Do I feel scolded by tornado sirens as oversized hail forms the divots it lands in? Today I do. I went to the bank today and asked to see the vaults. In the teller's plexiglass, a reflection caught my eye and confirmed my purpose. I was wanting a dialogue with a can of sparkling water in plain view of an open bank vault. What I found out is that our world is inadequately on their terms because our failing attempts root almost everything as them. They, who can never cure us of our torments, permit me now to trace characters on a formerly blank piece of paper. Fort Detrick in the air of itself, I write. The existent in the existing, I write. Resist despair by tying itself to its own forgettable scenery. It writes us up for what we do not know. I want something other than time. Yes itself, to my voice says. Welcome to the precision of a situation that doesn't assume it. The one cup that tells us drink it, and the one cup that tells us we can't. Go over there, my voice says. Where there is always a room, and over is a voice wanting out of language. Think what'll happen to music when we're out of time. Yes, I can respect that. My ego is a person and says, the voice calls on me, but doesn't let it settle in on being able. It simply avoids the machine that is my work. Between the pretense of two opposing factions, I'm my stranger to property, stranger than property. I want something other than time. A bank teller slapped a bank teller. That's all I've got left. The limits of which we shall soon see. A bank teller slapped a bank teller. Without irony, I've been there. Have recognized and discovered myself there. A frozen pizza. We can receive nothing from ourselves but the past. The charges were dropped. Soon every possible word will have been. Soon every possible word will have been and will be a pun. It feels pure to exude without irony a power of total renewal. But the sentence given will still require a verb and go cartoonish. A remainder of precisely this produced as that. I want something other than time. Is it knowledge or is it magic that encompasses everything in my life? My ego looks to the light of my ego and presides, providing forwards as though my future identity had already come to me. The sock, incapable of rational knowledge, once removed from the foot, can find no reason. Does it lie there in total relation to itself, overloading the ground? Because my encounter is clearly somehow about loss, about what I must have in the beginning turned immemorial for this intuition of what will come next to remain. Because of this, because the other dimensions of light around this light will regard but not surmount it. I'm too wrapped up to speculate on the result of this thing, to care for its rendering of me and poem seriously. Who cares? I want something other than time. Think of a thread, finer by 1 degree than what constitutes thread. It doesn't hold the line. It's not within our intention. In what it isn't is a rearrangeability through which it proceeds as it begins, increasing the interim of a lost union. And then just a moment ago, we're repeating an impression. We've had a similar feeling and we have to repeat it. I tried to write an essay that would proceed by this insight to describe it. But what emerged was a way of banishing what I could see, such that the force of its expulsion would resound in its place as though a matter of principle. Here, though, in this poem, my insatiable proximity to these impassable distances from me itself feels curbed. So why do I feel as disturbed as comforted by this? Now I'm cupping my book because of its rays of quotable pith, because it's another perfect prism for the reappearance. I want something other than time. I want to feel okay right here. I want to say I'm not wasted in the choppy paint of thinks itself, and a dreamy obedience to the music proceeds me. As I've said before, a dream might not be built of representation. So cheap a ransom where the accident is almost repeated is an interior plane of expiring breath, hello, and then let go. I think the devil's in going back to a withheld meaning and letting its deferred presence prescribe a place we'll never get to. We're assuming then that this is one of them special clovers, abandoned like all things here to the hype of liberation. Oh, mortar, get me higher, the loud voice goes. Move away from the shore. I want something other than time. There is no victory over death, guys. The death guys free themselves, making themselves uncategorizable again and again. The end, an elastic dominion, artifice for us. I was recruited to be a poet, but our world, one of indefinite centers, has all the imitation gnosis and intermediaries it could burn, even this exceptional fatigue. Wherever, there being no splice to disclose us further, we still need private languages to bear eros into touch, to pass ourselves into attunement, to pass as imminent sonorous things. The sun, you say, remains unintelligible. I'm like Ditto the parent. All these alchemical codes, inscribing us to live by thoughts, to scale time.
Fantastic, Louis. Thank you. And closing things out, Jennifer Nelson is the author of the poetry books Harm Eden and Aim at the Centaur Stealing Your Wife, and of both from Ugly Duckling and of Civilization Makes Me Lonely from Asada. She teaches art history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is also the author of Disharmony of the Spheres, the Europe of Holbein's Ambassadors, and of the forthcoming Lucas Cranach, Artist of the Reformation. Early in Harm Eden, Jennifer Nelson writes, quote, "Words are dizzy, full, not null, and what follows is unsteadying and disorienting. These are, to borrow from Huan Wen, poems that are intertextual, entwined, weaving edges with language and events, both current and bedrock. In all their formal breadth and social, aesthetic, and political depth, these are poems that, quote, choose disruption, poems that, as Zhenya Turovskaya describes, stand amid the rubble of our collective mythologies and origin stories and survey the damage with a wry, irreverent intelligence." It's a real pleasure to welcome Jennifer Nelson.
Wow. I still haven't finished processing that, Louis, and I'm mad at you. I'm sad because I've had residual sit in that's my new favorite book of yours, and the other ones aren't anymore, so that's, wow. And Gabe, what a pleasure to read with you, especially before you cross the ocean to a new world. You know, Wendy's Subway changed a lot for me. So, thanks for all you've done in this country. Can't wait to see what you do in Ireland. I also just want to say, Woodland Pattern, how important are you? And how important are all of you working here? I'm so grateful to be included and to have this community and to be in a real room with real people doing real poetry. Not that it's not also real, you. But you know what I mean. Dan Owen, if you're out there, this looks so much even sicker. It's on Zoom, so thank you. It's really exciting. Invocation to the Muse. Have you ever found yourself harming the forest out of rage at your own feet? The leaves, so dense the wind brings tones from them. No sky but sky's gift, green sifted sun. Walk with me, O Cleo. I was wrong about your hands. They are not the hands of death at all. They're perfect, chubby, yet skeletal. The rhyme of the Western Tanager. Seagulls are here to talk about death. The death has no continuity as the glacier of the sky extends deep north onto Lake Superior, then east to the St. Lawrence, and skims across the first dead ocean. Wrong names. The gulls are forcing us to talk about death while the rain flaps its hands for us all. What is the first question? Who gave Hector his earring in the lost tapestry of Troy that is really Constantinople? Who misgrieved 1,000 years of Christians on the Bosporus Strait? The rain flaps its hands. The first question is, what would you say on the last day of school if you knew there were nothing else you could learn? The cars keep sliding over the ultimatum, abrading it and mudding it, but the line is, of course, much deeper. We know birth doesn't make color, nor is it local. That patch of yellow right above the mid-tailed ass and the sparkling fake tropic song have nothing to do with Wisconsin. A beautiful chain of rings spills from my embroidered collar. Garret, gallow, guillotine. The songbirds resettle without continuity. The pair of gulls, dawn and night. I must narrate this perfect person to whom there is nothing I can give. Their beautiful jokes about coffins and claims about honey, the tamer of horses, I must sew into the wall. Here, while the cars stop coming, the concept of audience is a dodge. Words are dizzy, full, not null. They decorate with silk the empty lodge. I've been having trouble reading this one. Hope I get through it. I hope to be an unsettler. No land has ever claimed me, no person, no people, no place. I am always standing between burials, and the nearest tree holds all I can know. At the spring, words bubble up and trickle down in banderoles. At first, I had to read them till the grass smelled sweet and the bugs bit home. Getting old means reading them, while the hill of my choices grows. At the end of the field, a deer measures the meadow. She is so small today. What words can you possibly wear? What can I bring you? I, so without kin, I have no hands, no apparatus, thus offer my persona as medium, a wager, assuming there's something past myself, or perhaps a way the particular dead with whom I've walked have shaped me in some unlit land. What land? I cannot even say it lies beneath the creek, because the creek can never be mine. No creek can ever be mine. I take what I should carry. There is a clicking sound when I stay still, like a gas stove failing. I defined by misfire. I defined by naked love, love without relation. I have piled miswords on your desire. Now I'm asking for forgiveness, not the ordinary kind, puckered with regret. I am asking for a kind of eternal endurance, like a child who jumps across a chasm and does not want to jump back. Keep me clicking, please, skimming while the bubbles break my feet. In the field, the deer finds grass at just her height, but not because she wants to disappear. Something's breathing to make those holes while the woodpecker strikes a pose. I have to believe the right world follows. I shout each time it comes, like the sun shouts a highway over open water, hoarse and right and wrong. I'm gonna need my water bottle. I have a secret. I have given my life to history, and I do not care about history. I care about the deceitful stillness of water cut off from its home and the fragility of skin, all skin, as the brave interface. I want to skin the knee of water. I want to tell you something so true, you sing like legs, carrying our hopelessly binary meaning in a third direction. This is the way night looks from the top of the Tower of Babel. On top of the Tower of Babel, we've murdered all possible kinds of building, all possible kinds of labor, and every architectural style. We sit there waiting for night that cannot reach us, or at least mostly doesn't anymore. It is the most beautiful meaning I've ever seen or heard. Watching you walk your song back to me on this once impossible patio built on the death of work and suffering, but somehow not of difference. We kept the curse. We have herb gardens. I am making you a salad now of fruit and sinless venison. Water condenses when it wills, saltlessly out of the eyes of anyone who agrees. Time doesn't need sight or detection. Without them, I keep its other name. All right, I don't have to just read the book straight through, skipping around. Anyone into samurai movies? Okay, like one person, that's fine. This poem will make you really into them. In which Toshiro Mifune and Tatsuya Nakadai never fight. The faces of samurai up close in the 60s twitch like finches. When I went into the Vineyard Sound, I felt an old distaste for slime on the smooth rocks at the surf and pressed the balls of my feet past it. The seaweed out in the water wrapping round my limbs and torso like a jellyfish as I swam to a scummy, inflatable raft and back to the broken up breakwater wayward jetty and back. I ask about a relation between portrait and close-up in painting from the Quattrocento or early Byzantine mosaic or the lead-up to ukiyo-e. Think of poems obsessed with the ocean or how automatons have seemed wrong yet delicious when humans could not record in time. This technology and nostalgia drives the samurai flickering from portrait to close-up by the force of emotion, from woodcut into cinema. Not that their feelings could translate wood, but that they carry the forest with them, already processed by our cuts. The ocean tastes delicious, and I forgot to drink it, thinking later it's as good as alive and carries only change, which makes it the greatest classic killer. This one's for Walt Hunter, who's just been such a great supporter over the years, and especially in the hell of these isolation times for me. So thanks, Walt. Thanks for liking this poem. Twilight in the New Life. The thing that changes is that hope ends, said a monk, applying mascara. Hope ends and work is left. On one side of the diptych appears a herd of buffalo, Poussined. On the other, you must see yourself again in thick clouds, forced out after many years in the league, in the thick clouds now, the star of many seasons. Oh, I have another shout out. This is going out to Katie Reinhardt, my history of science buddy at Madison, and hopefully forever. The history of medicine. For those who don't know Vesalius invented remote teaching with unethical human subjects and the premise of virtuality. Woodcuts aren't holograms, but good enough. Good. Now imagine Vesalius touching your baby. He talks a lot about it, especially the skull, from which he draws conclusions about softness, reminds him of rain on Vesuvius, he writes in his diary, which will not survive. Rain on Vesuvius before or after an eruption, asks a later entry. While in quarantine, Vesalius writes letters to his past. The past, as best as he and we can reconstruct it, answers during. Think of smoke, bushes on lava, and ash balls freighted with wet, ongoing death by suffocation, steamed by unrocked rock. No one wants Vesalius to touch their infant's head, but he does over millennia and miles that aren't his. Creeper caress like a carry act in sacred time, while in Wisconsin, over fields of unborn corn, 5 hawks arrive for slaughter. This is the title poem of the book, and it's an acrostic poem. I'm kind of hoping it's like one of the longer acrostic poems in existence, but I don't know, maybe you know, I don't know, Lewis. But basically, I was in like a real shit spot about like 3 years ago, and didn't really have anywhere to stay, and a bunch of friends stepped up, and I basically like lived with them all summer, which was amazing, and I will never forget it. And yeah, the acrostic just like spells out all their names. different sections. I might wave my hand around to indicate the sections. We'll see if I manage that. So many thanks / harm eaten. So much supposed to be beautiful's beautiful only because it's not alive, not mixed, not the first chimera, world and outworld, needing each other to stay young and old, respectively. Tell you the truth, harm's the only garden here, and recovery, it's asters. News comes from repeating knobs of wisteria, oozing slugs and corn silk flies, singing upside down about Earth's automobiles and jets to insensible and wild hydrangeas and osprey. Guillotines chatter in streets upkept by professional immigrants, streaming laundry lines of visas, left hands raised, an oathing crusade in fidelity under skyscraper chuppahs, melting in terrorist ecstasy. This is also the museum. Running away is not an option. Everyone, of course, runs back into the same elephant working their personal circus, one ring closing on the audience. And the trunk curlicues a note. Maybe we are the entertainment. If we feed, say, mosquitoes, we should know this as our particular effect, in other words, meaning. Olive groves still exist, lined with cats who invest in the end of all resources. Value this, per their tall-tailed ends, well licked. What better reverence to Athena? Autoimmune snake, reclining gently into its own tail, and forgiving itself its own nature, scale by scale. All animals self-metaphorize. Animal humans most of all. Listen, every morning issues its own frequency, cicada style. What if everyone knew their sonic simile? As a form of greeting, rubbing limbs carefully and matching each oscillation, it'd crowd out silent xenophobia, sound. The number 2 tells us we should have bypassed Janus by now, and the binary. Every day we survive the US-American blight, we plant new engines for a world, jump-started past comparatives. Engineers push code back into its own navel, a spring in itself, no input. I said this before, imagine yearning twinned with love satisfied, a listserv that only I check, to which everyone subscribes. Interlude, the Sibyl. Oh, people took care of my cat. They're named after the Sibyl. Come to think of it, how could our paradise run its self-destruction and not intermit? suffering like the tide intercepts itself nonstop. There is no final exhibition of capital, but home, which flickers, relentless as a fly. Harm, Eden pays its bill and tips, then totters down the strip. June arrives, July. Elsewhere, oil rigs stamp deeper and harder and more. Ransom is called on Utopia. Diamonds found on Saturn array themselves against its ice. How will we, networks of gardens, collaborate across texts? Over eons of lakes, little melodies persist. Cob, ibis, pigeon, a cord like a fist. A dead nightingale falls off our wrists. This is a poem for Isaac Sinan Searle and for Gustav Percival. If I think I've survived enough, then it's time to start doing the thing I survived for, casting the leaves' glitter into another creature's nest. I woke up in the middle of the night and went to transcribe my recurring dream when Isaac was born. The dream is something like, I'm live testing a simulation, and meanwhile must suppress critiques in order to survive, in order to deliver them. I want to ask Gustav to let me watch his snuffing, since he would have once been into that, but I can tell dying makes him not. To survive the parameters of this world, but recall the roads of the one we want in the cruddy petrichor, the world where it's safe to give a world to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, Louis, Gabe, everybody here, everybody out there for joining us. Have a good night. Bye. Thanks.